Good morning. Welcome again to our live webinar on various family law topics, issues, questions and answers. We try our best to advise the public and assist you to be able to deal with your specific legal issues, to understand the law, and also to apply the law to your specific scenario. It is one thing to read something from a law book, for example, stipulating that both parents should pay maintenance, and it is another thing on how to apply that principle to your specific scenario. We all know that parents should pay maintenance, but what happens if a parent does not pay maintenance, for example? Alternatively, we all know that parents have parental rights and responsibilities towards their minor children. That is fine to know, that's good to know, but what do you do if those specific rights and responsibilities are violated? That is the purpose of these videos, and hopefully we can learn from each other and engage in order for us to benefit. At the same time, how do I benefit? I benefit from the questions which you pose, and by doing so, I can apply my mind and develop my mind. And sometimes there are questions which I do not, answers which I do not know to specific questions, and then I have to open up the law books, and after that exercise, I am much more educated. I wouldn't say wiser, but more educated. Please note we are having our live Zoom webinar whereby you can register. The webinar will take place on Saturday, the 10th of July 2021. You can see the details on the screen at 11 o'clock. Please register www.talalow.co.za/register. The advantage of that would be you can send your question when registering. It's very convenient. So if you have a specific legal question, a specific legal scenario which you want us to deal with, you can send it when you register. If you cannot join the video or the live webinar at the specific time, you will receive a link afterwards with the video details, or you can watch it live via YouTube. So that's fine, and we will deal with that specific question. Alternatively, what we have implemented recently is that if you are joining the webinar live, of course, you can interact with me and I can unmute your microphone on Zoom and we can engage with each other. Sometimes I do not find the gist of your question, or you might struggle in typing out exactly what the problem is, and via chatting to each other via audio on Zoom, I can have a better understanding of the legal problem you have, and in that way be able to assist you better. So please remember, you need to register for that webinar. The details are on the screen. At the end of this video, I will put on this picture and you would be able to register for that specific webinar. But nonetheless, today's topic: relocation of minor children and passport consent. What do I need to know? Some frequently asked questions, FAQs. The reason why I'm focusing on this topic is because many people are approaching us wanting to know, can they relocate? What are the circumstances? What are the requirements? It seems to me people no longer see themselves working only in one country, for example, South Africa, where we are now. They pursue careers overseas, they marry people overseas, or they form relationships with people overseas. They decide to further their education and travel overseas, study abroad, and so on. Therefore, gone are the days where people live in one country continuously until they are no longer there. People from a young age decide to relocate, and many of those specific persons have children, and that causes a bit of a challenge if there are problems, because the other parent would remain in the country and you want to take the minor child with you. Alternatively, you leave the minor child behind and you go overseas, but then you are worried or concerned about what type of contact and care rights you have. Therefore, that is what we are discussing today. Let us deal with the first question. Can I move from South Africa to the United Kingdom with my child without the father's permission? Very interesting question. You are the mother of the child. You want to move to the United Kingdom, either for work, a relationship with someone else. You might want to get married to somebody else, or for holiday, visit family, or live with family there indefinitely because things are not working so well here and you have family there. What answer do I provide? I stipulate the following. If the father has parental responsibilities and rights of guardianship, his consent is required for the relocation to the United Kingdom. For example, if the father and the mother were married, then under those circumstances, unless an order of court determines otherwise, the father's consent is required. That would generally be the answer. If they were married and they get divorced, the father will automatically, or usually 99.9%, retain his parental rights and responsibilities in relation to the minor child. That's the usual case. Then I go further. If the father was not married to the mother, but in a long-term relationship with the child, when the child was born, my apologies for that. He was in a long-term relationship with the mother when the child was born, and involved in the child's life after birth, then his consent under the circumstances would be required. So there are two scenarios. If a father and a mother is married, automatically his consent is required. Full stop. There are, of course, very few exceptions to that. If the father and the mother were not married, the father can acquire parental rights and responsibilities with regard to that specific child. He will have basically the same rights as the mother in relation to that child, but how will he acquire that? He needs to be involved in the child's life when the child was born. Pay maintenance, make an effort to see the child, take the child out, be in the child's life, not abandon the child. If that is the case, long story short, he has acquired parental rights and responsibilities with regard to the minor child, and his consent would be required. The difficulty you have with the second scenario, if a father has not acquired parental rights and responsibilities. Let us say mother fell pregnant, she gave birth, the father went missing. Or she gave birth in Cape Town, the father is a foreign national, he went back to his country, he has nothing to do with the minor child. The challenge you may have is when you apply for a passport for the minor child, or you apply for the child to leave the Republic of South Africa or into a different country, they might ask you, where is the father's consent? Where is the father? Why is he not here? And you will have to explain to them that the father is missing, but will they accept your answer? Will they accept your explanation? Because what if you are lying? What if the facts are the opposite? The father is involved in the child's life, but you decide now to leave the country with a minor child without the father's consent, because you know the father will say no. And you tell Home Affairs or the Pacific border control persons that the father is unknown to you, etc. Of course, they will be wary about those specific scenarios. Therefore, under those circumstances, I strongly presume that the Department of Home Affairs would want to know whether or not the father is around. And if you say he's not around, you'll obviously have to obtain a court order to stipulate that the father's consent is not required. They would basically require the father's consent. So I hope I answered that specific question for you. And if I have not, you're welcome to leave a comment on Facebook Live on the Advocate Mohammed Abduroaf Facebook page, and I'll try my best to elaborate further on that. But maybe dealing with the next few questions will assist us in answering the specific topic while unpacking it. Question 2. What do I do if the father refuses to consent to relocate to Germany? Basically, you're the mother and you want to relocate to Germany and the father does not want to give consent. And the answer is as follows. If a parent refuses to provide the necessary consent for relocation to another country, in this case, Germany, then the court must be approached. Basically, you would ask the court to dispense with the requirement of the father's consent. The court would determine the case based on what is best in the minor child's or regarding the minor child involved. Where am I going to with this? In terms of the Children's Act, Section 18 specifically stipulates that if a minor child wants to or needs to leave the country, apply for a passport and so on, both the consent of the guardians are required, both parents, if they are holders of parental rights and responsibilities. However, Section 18.5 specifically stipulates that both parents' consent is required, but if a court can override that. So you can approach a court and the court can stipulate, no, under these circumstances, I'm stipulating that only the mother's consent is required. Therefore, specifically with regard to this question, if you want to relocate, and in our example to Germany, and you have good reasons for that, there's good schools on the other side, there's good medical services, better life for you, better life for the child, you are the child's primary caregiver in any event, and why must the child be prejudiced living in South Africa if the child can go with you and so on. And the other parent says, no, I want the child to remain here and I want you to remain here because you are the primary caregiver. But the other parent cannot care for the child. I'm just putting that into the mix. Under those circumstances, you need to approach the court, the High Court. The High Court will now look at all the facts, look at what is best for the minor child, and if the court ultimately decides that it is in the minor child's best interest to relocate with the mother, the court will make such an order. So you need to approach a court if one parent refuses to provide the necessary parental responsibilities and rights consent regarding guardianship. The third question, there are 5 questions in total. The third question, what type of care and contact would the other parent exercise if I relocate to Saudi Arabia? Interesting question, but before I unpack that specific question, please remember to register for our webinar for Saturday. The link is www.talentlaw.co.za. Alternatively, look at this at the end of this webinar. You will get an opportunity to pose your question before the time, and I would obviously deal with that specific question in the webinar. Legal services are quite expensive. Consulting with lawyers are very expensive, especially specialist lawyers can be very expensive. Here you get the opportunity to engage with someone who knows family law quite well, and at the same time, other people can benefit from it as well. So your question might be applicable to somebody else and so on. And you will get the opportunity to actually engage with me, either type in Zoom specific questions, which I can deal with as well on the whiteboard. Alternatively, I can unmute your microphone and you can engage with me via Zoom. So please, I would like to see each one of you to register. If you are not available Saturday, still register. Please do that. The video will be sent to you later on. It will be on YouTube. Okay, back to the third question. How is contact exercised should one parent relocate? And here we're using the example, Saudi Arabia. And this is important. When you approach the High Court for consent to relocate, you need to deal with the aspect as how can the other parent or how will the other parent exercise contact to the minor child should you be that side. And you must say you're amenable to video contact, holiday contact, the child can fly back to South Africa or the other parent can fly to Saudi Arabia, etc. So my answer is as follows. In this digital age, there is no reason why a parent cannot have regular contact to his or her child if they live in different countries. Usually, contact would take place via Skype, WhatsApp, FaceTime, or other digital means. Now we have Zoom, and we have MS Teams as well. And Google has various other softwares and platforms that you can use. Instagram as well. You can use those specific platforms to engage with someone else via video overseas. Email and other messaging services, my apologies, are also effective. When the children returns for holiday or the parent visits them overseas, then contact should be reasonable. For example, a few days with a non-custodial parent. Basically, the court will allow you to relocate to the minor child, but the court wants to know that there will be continuous contact with the minor child and the parent that remains behind. That's very important because it will not be in the minor child's best interest for a parent to relocate to the minor child and contact to the parent who remains behind is now cut off. It may be better for the minor child to remain in South Africa with a bit of a hard life, but not to be traumatized by not having contact with the other parent. So that is very, very important. Question number 4, and our second last question. Oops. My child does not have a passport. Do I require the father's consent to obtain one? Okay, so previously we dealt with the issue regarding relocation consent, on the assumption that there was a passport, but now let's deal with the passport aspect. Do you require both parents' consent when it comes to a passport? The answer is obviously yes. If you are co-holder of parental rights and responsibilities in terms of Section 18 of the Children's Act, my apologies, it specifically stipulates that both parents should consent. If one parent does not want to consent, you can approach a high court in terms of Section 18.5. So let us answer that. In terms of the Children's Act, if a father has parental responsibilities and rights of guardianship, his consent is required for the minor child's application for a passport. If the father's name is on the birth certificate, more than likely the Department of Home Affairs will insist on having his consent. So this is a very interesting point. Many clients come to my office now quite recently, and they approach me and they say the father does not want to consent for the renewal of the minor child's passport. But then I asked him a question: 5 years ago, when you applied for the passport the first time, did the father give consent? Then they say no, Home Affairs did not require consent. They basically say they cannot find the father, or whatever answer they had. But it seems to me the Department of Home Affairs is much stricter now, whereby they specifically require the father's consent. So whatever arguments you had 5 years ago is not applicable now. And quite a few clients came to me, I'm talking about more than 2 people came to me, and they specifically stipulated that previously when they applied for the first passport, or 5 years ago at least, for the passport for the minor child, there was not an issue. They did not require the father to be present under the circumstances, but now they require. That is why they came to my office for a court order stipulating that the father's consent is no longer required. Please remember our webinar for Saturday. I hope that you are registering. Below my video, where you're watching me on the screen, there is a registration link, www.talalaw.co.za/register. Please register for Saturday. There will be many more webinars for the next 3-4 weeks. That's a plan to do a series of them. You will benefit from that. And feel free to pose your question when you're registering. Last question. When can a child legally decide which parent to live with? Interesting question. Question not necessarily applicable to relocation passport applications per se, but of course, the child might want to say, I do not want to relocate with my one parent because I want to stay in Cape Town or Johannesburg, or I want to relocate. Do we listen to the child? The answer is as follows. In South Africa, a child is no longer under the guardianship of a parent when he or she turns 18 years old. That's very important. When you're 18 years old, you are an adult. You're no longer a child. You decide for yourself. So here we're dealing with kids 17 and below. Therefore, when the child turns 18 years old, he or she can decide where he wants to stay and with whom he wants to stay. He or she. The same applies in the case of relocation. The father's consent would not be required should the minor child decide to relocate to another country with the mother. The opposite also applies. Okay, let's go further. If the child is mature enough, and I would say from maybe 9, 10 up, depending upon the circumstances, the level of maturity of the child, stage of development, etc., and also what the circumstances are. Here we're dealing with relocation. And we're dealing with various scenarios. We're not dealing with a scenario, for example, where the father wants to have contact, but more on a Saturday or on a Sunday. Here we're dealing with a important decision to be made whether or not relocation should take place because of the drastic steps that will be applicable. Depending upon the child's maturity, you would like to consult with the child. But generally, when it comes to relocation matters, the weight will be more placed upon whether or not it will ultimately be based in the minor child's interest based upon the facts of the circumstances, not necessarily what the child wants. Because the child can say, no, I want to stay in Cape Town with daddy because I do not want to go to Germany. Or the child says, no, I want to go to Germany, but the facts surrounding does not necessarily support that. But nonetheless, the law says you must listen to a child, you must give a child a voice, and I believe in that. Let us listen to the child or what the child wants. But if the child says, I want to stay here in Cape Town with dad, but dad never ever looked after the minor child in the past, obviously that will be a bit problematic, as opposed to a normal care and contact situation whereby we can play around and maybe mediate the issues. That is it. I hope to see you all online on Saturday. Please do not forget to be online on Saturday and register at the end of this webinar, and we will see you then.